Marcus Chen sat on the cold concrete steps of the Chicago Public Library. His hands shook as he tried to count the few coins in his pocket. 5 years ago, these same hands had played piano for thousands of people. Now they could barely hold a cup of coffee without spilling it. The morning sun felt warm on his face, but Marcus felt cold inside. He looked down at his clothes. His jacket had 3 holes in it. His shoes had no laces. His pants were dirty and too big for him now. He had lost so much weight. Food was hard to find when you had no money. Marcus remembered when everything was different. He used to wear expensive suits, black suits that cost more money than most people made in a month. His shoes were always shiny. His hair was always perfect. People would take pictures of him. They would ask for his signature. They would tell him how amazing he was. That was before the drinking started. Before the pills. Before he lost everything that mattered to him. Marcus had been only 7 years old when he first touched a piano. His mother had saved money for months to buy him lessons. She worked 2 jobs to pay for them. She cleaned offices at night and worked at a grocery store during the day. But she believed in her son. She knew he was special, and Marcus was special. By age 10, he could play songs that took most people years to learn. By 15, he was playing concerts in big cities. By 20, he was famous all over the world. People called him a genius. They said he was the best piano player of his time. Marcus had everything. A big house with a swimming pool. 3 cars. Money in the bank. A beautiful wife named Sarah. She was a violin player. They met at a concert in New York. She had long black hair and the prettiest smile Marcus had ever seen. They were happy for 5 years. They traveled the world together. They played music together. They talked about having children. They talked about growing old together. Marcus thought his life was perfect, but fame is a strange thing. It can make people feel like they are better than others. It can make them think they can do anything they want. It can make them forget what is really important. Marcus started drinking wine at fancy parties. Just a little at first, then more and more. He told himself it helped him relax. He told himself all famous musicians drank. He told himself it made his music better. Then came the pills. First pills to help him sleep. Then pills to help him wake up. Then pills to help him not feel nervous before concerts. Soon, Marcus needed pills just to feel normal. Sarah tried to help him. She begged him to stop drinking. She asked him to throw away the pills. She cried and pleaded with him. But Marcus was angry all the time now. He yelled at her. He said she did not understand the pressure he felt. He said she was trying to control him. The fights got worse. Marcus would come home drunk and angry. He would break things. He would say mean things to Sarah. Things he did not really mean. Things that hurt her heart. One night, Marcus came home very late. He had been drinking and taking pills. Sarah was waiting for him in the living room. She had been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. "I cannot do this anymore," she said quietly. "I love you, but I cannot watch you destroy yourself. And I cannot let you destroy me too." She had packed her bags. She left that night. Marcus never saw her again. After Sarah left, Marcus got worse. He missed concerts because he was too drunk to play. He forgot important meetings. He showed up late to everything. His manager tried to help him, but Marcus would not listen. The music companies stopped calling him. The concert halls did not want him anymore. Nobody wanted to work with someone they could not trust. Marcus had burned every bridge he had built. Soon the money was gone too. Marcus had spent it on alcohol and drugs. He had not paid his bills. The bank took his house. They took his cars. They took everything. Marcus tried to get help. He went to a place where people go to stop drinking and taking drugs. He stayed there for 3 months. For a while, he thought he was getting better. He thought he could get his life back. But when he got out, nothing was the same. Nobody wanted to hire him. His friends had stopped calling long ago. He had no place to live. He had no money. He had nothing. That was 2 years ago. Since then, Marcus had been living on the streets. He slept in doorways and under bridges. He ate food from garbage cans. He asked strangers for money. People looked at him like he was dirty, like he was dangerous, like he was nothing. Sometimes Marcus would walk past music stores. He would look at the pianos in the windows. His fingers would move like he was playing them. But he had not touched a real piano in months. Nobody would let someone like him near their expensive instruments. Marcus often thought about his mother. She had died 3 years ago, right before his life fell apart. She never got to see how bad things became. Marcus was glad about that. It would have broken her heart to see her son like this. Sometimes Marcus wondered if he should just give up completely. What was the point of living like this? What was the point of being alive when you had nothing left? When nobody cared if you lived or died? But deep inside, somewhere he tried not to think about, Marcus still felt something. It was small and weak, but it was still there. It was the love of music. The thing that had made him special as a child. The thing that had made his mother so proud. The thing that had brought him and Sarah together. Even now, sitting on these cold steps with holes in his shoes and no money in his pocket, Marcus could hear music in his head. Beautiful music, sad music, music that told the story of everything he had lost, music that cried for all the mistakes he had made. Marcus looked up at the sky. It was getting cloudy. It might rain soon. He needed to find somewhere to stay dry. He slowly stood up and started walking down the street. His legs were stiff and sore. As he walked, Marcus hummed quietly to himself. It was a song his mother used to sing to him when he was little, a simple song about hope, about better days coming, about not giving up. Marcus did not know it yet, but in just a few hours his life was about to change again. Not because of luck or chance, but because of music. The one thing that had never really left him. The one thing that could still save him. The one thing that could still make him whole again. Marcus walked down Michigan Avenue as the afternoon sun began to hide behind gray clouds. His stomach hurt from not eating. He had not had food since yesterday morning, when he found half a sandwich in a trash can behind a restaurant. He stopped walking when he saw a big building made of white stone. Gold letters on the front said Millennium Music Academy. Through the tall windows, Marcus could see young people holding violins and sitting at pianos. The sound of music came from inside. Even through the thick walls, Marcus could hear it. Marcus moved closer to the building. He pressed his face against the cool glass window. Inside, he saw something that made his heart hurt. A beautiful black piano sat in the middle of a large room. It was the same kind of piano he used to play. A Steinway grand piano, the most expensive and beautiful piano in the world. Around the piano, young people sat in chairs. They were maybe 18 or 19 years old. They wore nice clothes, clean clothes, expensive clothes. The girls had perfect hair and jewelry. The boys wore suits that looked like they cost more money than Marcus had seen in 2 years. A girl with long blonde hair was playing the piano. Her name was Victoria Sterling. She was the daughter of a famous music teacher. Her father was Heinrich Sterling, one of the most important people in the music world. Victoria had been taking piano lessons since she was 4 years old. She had never wanted for anything in her whole life. Victoria played well, but Marcus could tell she was just playing notes. She was not feeling the music. She was not putting her heart into it. She was playing like a machine, like someone who had learned the right way to move her fingers but had never learned what music really meant. Marcus watched her play and felt sad. This girl had everything he had lost. She had a good piano. She had teachers. She had money. She had a future. But she was wasting it. She did not understand how lucky she was. Marcus was so busy watching through the window that he did not notice when the music lesson ended. He did not see the students getting up from their chairs. He did not see them walking toward the door. Suddenly, the big front door of the building opened. Victoria and 5 other students came outside. They were laughing and talking loudly. They carried expensive instrument cases and designer bags. "I am so tired," Victoria said to her friends. "These lessons are so boring. I wish my father would let me quit and just focus on shopping and parties." Her friends laughed. One boy named James said, "At least you do not have to practice every day like I do. My parents make me play violin for 3 hours every day. I hate it. Music is so old-fashioned anyway," said a girl named Ashley. "I would rather be making videos for social media. That is where the real money is." Marcus felt angry hearing them talk this way. These children had no idea how precious music was. They had no idea how many people would give anything to have what they had. Marcus was still standing close to the window. The students noticed him for the first time. Victoria looked at him and made a face like she smelled something bad. "You," she said loudly. "Look at this homeless guy. He is so gross. Why is he standing near our school?" The other students turned to look at Marcus. They started laughing and pointing at him. Marcus felt his face get hot with shame. He tried to walk away, but Victoria called out to him, "Hey you, she yelled. Yeah, you with the dirty clothes. What are you doing here? This is a private school. You do not belong here. Marcus stopped walking. He turned around slowly. His hands were shaking, but not from hunger this time. They were shaking from anger. I was just looking, Marcus said quietly. I was not bothering anyone. Just looking at what? James asked, laughing. Looking at things you could steal? I was looking at the piano, Marcus said. I used to play piano. This made the students laugh even harder. Victoria laughed so hard she had to hold her stomach. You, she said. You used to play piano? That is the funniest thing I have ever heard. Look at you. You are a bum, a nobody. You probably do not even know what a piano is. Ashley pulled out her phone. This is going to be so funny, she said. I am going to record this and put it online. Everyone is going to laugh at this crazy homeless guy who thinks he can play piano. Marcus felt something break inside his chest. These children were making fun of the one thing that still mattered to him. The one thing that was still part of who he really was. I am not lying, Marcus said, his voice getting stronger. I really did play piano. I played in concerts. I played for thousands of people. Sure you did, Victoria said with a mean smile. And I am the Queen of England. You are crazy, old man. You probably have not touched a piano in your whole life. Victoria reached into her expensive purse and pulled out some coins. She threw them at Marcus's feet. The coins hit the sidewalk and rolled around his dirty shoes. Here, she said. Here is some money for you. But you have to earn it. Play something for us, piano man. Show us how good you are. Play us a song, bum. The other students joined in. They started throwing more coins at Marcus. They chanted, play bum, play bum, play bum. People walking by stopped to watch. Some of them took out their phones to record what was happening. Marcus felt like the whole world was laughing at him. Marcus looked down at the coins scattered around his feet. He looked at the cruel faces of the young people. He looked at Victoria, who was smiling like she had just won some kind of game. For a moment, Marcus thought about just walking away. He thought about picking up the coins and leaving. He thought about going back to his life of hiding in doorways and eating from trash cans. But then something happened. Something deep inside Marcus woke up. It was like a sleeping lion opening its eyes. It was the part of him that had never really died. The part of him that was still Marcus Chen, the great piano player. Marcus looked up at Victoria. His eyes were different now. They were not the eyes of a broken homeless man anymore. They were the eyes of someone who had once commanded the respect of the whole world. You want me to play? Marcus asked. His voice was calm now, steady, strong. Victoria stopped laughing. Something in his voice made her feel nervous, but she did not know why. Yes, she said, but her voice was not as confident as before. I want you to play. I want you to show us what a great piano player you are. Marcus bent down and picked up one of the coins. He held it up so Victoria could see it. One song, he said. Give me access to your piano for one song and I will show you what music really means. The students looked at each other. This was not going the way they had planned. The homeless man was not acting scared anymore. He was acting like he actually knew what he was talking about. Fine, Victoria said. She was too proud to back down now. One song. But when you embarrass yourself, you have to leave and never come back. Marcus smiled for the first time in months. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to prove everyone wrong. Deal, he said. Victoria opened the door to the music academy. She was sure she was about to watch this homeless man make a fool of himself. She had no idea that she was about to witness something that would change her life forever. As Marcus followed the students into the building, he could already hear the music in his head. Beautiful, powerful music. Music that would show these children what they had never understood. Music that would remind the world who Marcus Chen really was. Marcus stepped inside the Millennium Music Academy for the first time. The smell hit him immediately. It was the smell of wood polish and expensive leather. The smell of money and privilege. The smell of a world he had once belonged to but had lost forever, or so he thought. The building was beautiful inside. The floors were made of shiny marble that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The walls were covered with paintings of famous musicians from history. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, all the great masters who had created the music that Marcus loved. Victoria walked in front of Marcus like she owned the place, which in many ways she did. Her father, Heinrich Sterling, was not just a teacher at this academy. He was one of the people who had started it. The Sterling family had more money than most people could imagine. Victoria had never worried about anything in her whole life. The other students followed behind them. James, Ashley, and 3 other rich kids whose names Marcus did not know. They were all still laughing and talking like this was some kind of game. Like Marcus was a toy they had found to play with. "I cannot wait to see this," Ashley whispered to James. "This is going to be so embarrassing for him. I am going to get so many views when I post this video online." "My dad is going to love this story," James said. "He always says homeless people are just lazy. This will prove it. When this guy cannot even play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, everyone will know he is just a liar and a drunk." Marcus heard every word they said. Each word was like a knife in his heart, but he did not let it show on his face. He had learned to hide his feelings during his 2 years on the streets. When people treat you like you are nothing, you learn to not give them the satisfaction of seeing you hurt. But inside, Marcus was feeling something he had not felt in a long time. It was not just anger, though he was angry. It was not just sadness, though he was sad. It was determination. It was the feeling he used to get before big concerts when he was young. The feeling that said, "I am going to show them something they will never forget." They walked down a long hallway lined with practice rooms. Through the small windows in each door, Marcus could see students playing different instruments: violins, cellos, flutes, trumpets, the sound of many different kinds of music mixed together in the air. Marcus remembered being young and walking down hallways like this. He remembered the excitement of learning new pieces. He remembered the joy of discovering that his fingers could make beautiful sounds come from piano keys. He remembered when music was not about fame or money, when it was just about the pure love of creating something beautiful. "Here we are," Victoria announced as they reached a big door at the end of the hallway. "This is our main performance hall. This is where we have our important concerts and recitals." She opened the door and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The room was magnificent. It was large enough to hold 200 people. The walls were covered with dark wood panels that made the acoustics perfect. Rows of red velvet seats faced a stage at the front of the room, and on that stage sat the most beautiful piano Marcus had ever seen. It was a Steinway Model D concert grand piano. 9 feet long and worth more than most people's houses. The black surface was so shiny that Marcus could see himself reflected in it from across the room. It was the same kind of piano he had played in Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center, and all the great concert halls of the world. Marcus had not touched a piano like this in over 2 years. He had not touched any piano in 6 months. His fingers started to tingle just looking at it. "Well," Victoria said impatiently, "there is your piano. Let us see what you can do, maestro." She said the word maestro like it was a joke. Marcus walked slowly toward the stage. Each step felt like he was walking through water. His legs felt weak. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. What if he had forgotten how to play? What if his fingers did not work anymore? What if the alcohol and drugs had damaged his brain so much that he could not remember the music? What if these kids were right and he really was just a crazy homeless man who was imagining things? Marcus stopped at the bottom of the steps that led up to the stage. He looked back at the students. They were all watching him with excited faces. They could not wait to see him fail. They could not wait to laugh at him and record his failure on their phones. Ashley already had her phone out and was recording. "This is going to be epic," she whispered to her friends. Marcus looked at Victoria. She was standing with her arms crossed and a big smile on her face. She was so sure that she was about to win this game. She was so sure that this dirty homeless man could not possibly know how to play her beautiful piano. "What are you waiting for?" Victoria asked. "Are you scared? Are you finally going to admit that you were lying?" Marcus stared at her for a long moment. He saw in her face everything that was wrong with the world he had once lived in. He saw the arrogance, the cruelty, the belief that money and privilege made you better than other people. He saw his own younger self before life had taught him what really mattered. "I am not scared," Marcus said quietly. "I am just choosing what to play." This made the students laugh again. "Oh, you get to choose?" James said mockingly. "How generous of us. What are you going to play? Happy birthday?" Marcus ignored him. He walked up the steps to the stage. With each step, he felt something changing inside him. The shame was melting away. The fear was disappearing. Something else was taking their place. Something powerful and familiar. It was confidence. Real confidence. Not the fake confidence that comes from money or clothes or what other people think of you, but the confidence that comes from knowing who you really are, from knowing what you can really do. Marcus stood in front of the piano bench. He looked down at the keys. 88 black and white keys that could create any sound in the universe. Keys that had been waiting for the right person to touch them. Keys that had been waiting for him. He sat down on the bench and adjusted it to the right height. His body remembered exactly how to sit, his back straight but relaxed, his arms loose, his wrists at the perfect angle. Marcus placed his hands above the keys but did not touch them yet. He closed his eyes and listened to the music in his head. He could hear it so clearly now. A piece by Chopin, Ballade No. 1 in G minor. One of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. It was not an easy piece. It was not something you played to show off. It was something you played when you wanted to say everything that was in your heart. When you wanted to tell the story of a life that had known both great joy and great pain. Marcus opened his eyes and looked out at the students. They were still laughing and talking, not paying attention to him anymore. They thought this was already over. They thought they had already won. But Marcus knew something they did not know. He knew that some things in life could not be taken away. No matter how far you fell, no matter how much you lost, some things stayed with you forever. Music was one of those things. Marcus smiled a real smile for the first time in years. Then he placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The first note filled the room like thunder, clear and strong and perfect. The students stopped talking immediately. Their mouths fell open in shock. Because this was not the sound of a crazy homeless man pretending to play piano. This was the sound of a master returning to his instrument. This was the sound of magic being born. Marcus's fingers moved across the keys like they had never stopped playing. Like the last 2 years had been just a bad dream. The music poured out of him like water from a broken dam. And in that moment, everything changed forever. The sound of Marcus playing piano traveled through the walls of the Millennium Music Academy, like electricity. It moved down hallways and through closed doors. It found its way into practice rooms where students stopped playing their own instruments to listen. It drifted into offices where teachers put down their papers and turned their heads toward the sound. In the main performance hall, Victoria Sterling stood frozen. Her mouth was open, but no words came out. This was not what was supposed to happen. The homeless man was supposed to embarrass himself. He was supposed to prove that he was just a crazy person with impossible dreams. Instead, the most beautiful music Victoria had ever heard was filling the room, music that made her chest feel tight, music that made her eyes start to water even though she did not understand why. Ashley had been recording with her phone, expecting to capture something funny to share with her friends online. But now her hand was shaking so much that she could barely hold the phone steady. The music was so beautiful that it hurt to listen to. It was like looking directly at the sun. This cannot be real, James whispered to himself. This cannot be happening, but it was happening. Marcus Chen, the man they had thrown coins at and called names, was playing piano like an angel. His fingers moved across the keys so fast they were almost a blur, but every note was perfect. Every note was exactly where it needed to be. Word spread quickly through the academy. Students began leaving their practice rooms and walking toward the performance hall. Teachers stopped their lessons and followed the sound of the music. Even the security guards came to see what was happening. In his office on the 3rd floor, Heinrich Sterling was reviewing applications from students who wanted to attend the academy next year. Heinrich was Victoria's father and one of the most respected music teachers in the world. He had worked with the greatest musicians of his time. He knew talent when he heard it. When the sound of Marcus's playing reached his office, Heinrich dropped his pen. He sat perfectly still and listened. His trained ear could tell immediately that this was not one of his students playing. This was someone else, someone extraordinary. Heinrich had heard this level of playing only a few times in his life. It reminded him of the great masters he had known personally. Pianists who had devoted their entire lives to their art. Pianists who understood that music was not just about hitting the right notes at the right time. It was about telling stories with sound. It was about touching people's souls. But who could be playing like this in his academy? All of his students were talented, but none of them had this level of skill. None of them had this depth of feeling in their music. Heinrich got up from his desk and walked quickly toward the performance hall. As he got closer, He could hear that the mystery pianist was playing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire. Most professional pianists could not play it well. Many of them could not play it at all. But this person was not just playing it well. They were playing it perfectly. They were playing it like Chopin himself might have played it. When Heinrich reached the performance hall, he found a crowd of people gathered outside the doors. Students, teachers, and staff members were all trying to get inside to see who was playing. The room was already full. So many people had to stand in the hallway and listen. Heinrich pushed through the crowd. As the director of the academy, people moved aside to let him pass. When he reached the doorway and looked inside, he could not believe what he saw. On the stage, sitting at the beautiful Steinway piano, was a man in dirty, torn clothes. His hair was messy and unwashed. His face was thin and pale. He looked like he had not had a good meal in weeks, but his hands were moving across the piano keys like they were extensions of his soul. Every movement was graceful and precise. Every note sang out clear and true. Heinrich had seen this level of artistry before, but only from the greatest pianists in the world. Pianists whose names were known in every concert hall on earth. Pianists who had spent decades perfecting their craft. Who was this homeless man? How could someone living on the streets play piano like this? Then Heinrich looked more closely at the man's face. Something about him seemed familiar. The shape of his nose, the way he held his head when he played, the expression of complete concentration and joy. Heinrich's heart began to beat faster. It could not be. It was impossible. But the more he looked, the more certain he became. The homeless man playing piano in his academy was Marcus Chen. Heinrich had met Marcus Chen 7 years ago at a concert in New York. Marcus had been at the height of his fame then. He was young and successful and full of confidence. Heinrich had been impressed not just by Marcus's technical skill, but by his musical intelligence. Marcus understood music in a way that few people ever did. Heinrich had heard rumors about what happened to Marcus afterward. Stories about drinking and drugs, stories about a career that fell apart, stories about a marriage that ended. Heinrich had assumed they were just gossip. He had assumed that Marcus was still somewhere, still playing, still creating beautiful music. But now Heinrich understood the truth. Marcus Chen, one of the most gifted pianists of his generation, had lost everything. He had fallen so far that he was living on the streets like a beggar. And yet, here he was, playing with more passion and skill than ever before. The pain and suffering he had experienced had not destroyed his talent. It had deepened it. It had given his music a power that it had never had before. In the audience, Victoria Sterling was crying. She did not understand why. She had never cried listening to music before. She had always thought of music as something you had to do, like homework or chores. She had never realized that music could reach inside you and touch places you did not even know existed. The homeless man her father had taught her to look down upon was showing her something she had never seen before. He was showing her what music could really do. What it could really mean. Ashley had stopped recording. Her phone hung forgotten in her hand as she listened to the most beautiful sounds she had ever heard. She felt ashamed of the cruel things she had said to Marcus. She felt ashamed of the coins she had thrown at his feet. James was thinking about all the hours he had spent practicing violin, hating every minute of it. He had always seen music as a burden his parents had forced on him. But listening to Marcus play, he began to understand what his parents had been trying to give him. They had been trying to give him access to something magical, something that could transform the world. All around the room, people were having the same experience. Students who had taken music lessons for years were hearing music in a completely new way. Teachers who had devoted their lives to music education were remembering why they had fallen in love with music in the first place. Marcus continued to play, unaware of the effect he was having on his audience. He was lost in the music now, lost in the story the piano was telling. It was the story of his life, the joy of his early success, the pain of his fall, the loneliness of his years on the streets, the hope that music would always be with him, no matter what else he lost. Heinrich Sterling wiped tears from his eyes and tried to process what he was witnessing. He was seeing something that most people never got to see in their entire lives. He was seeing pure art, pure truth, pure beauty, and he was seeing redemption. Marcus Chen was proving that talent could not be destroyed. That genius could not be erased. that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what really mattered. The music built toward its climax, filling every corner of the room with sound and emotion. Heinrich knew that when this song ended, nothing would ever be the same again. For Marcus, for Victoria, for everyone who was lucky enough to witness this moment, music had the power to change lives, and Marcus Chen was about to prove it. Heinrich Sterling pushed through the crowd of students and teachers until he reached the front of the performance hall. He needed to get closer. He needed to be absolutely sure of what he was seeing and hearing. As Heinrich moved closer to the stage, the music became even more powerful. Every note that Marcus played seemed to speak directly to Heinrich's heart. This was not just excellent piano playing. This was something far beyond that. This was music that told a story. Music that carried the weight of a human soul. Heinrich had been teaching music for 30 years. He had worked with some of the most talented young musicians in the world. He had heard thousands of students play thousands of pieces, but he had never heard anything like this. The way Marcus shaped each phrase was perfect. The way he built tension and then released it. The way he made the piano sing and cry and whisper and shout. It was like watching a master painter create a masterpiece, except the paint was sound and the canvas was silence. Heinrich studied Marcus's face as he played. Marcus's eyes were closed now, and there was an expression of complete peace on his features. All the pain and exhaustion that had been written there before seemed to have melted away. When Marcus played, he became someone else. He became who he was always meant to be. And then Heinrich was absolutely certain. This was Marcus Chen. Heinrich remembered him clearly now. 7 years ago, Heinrich had been invited to a special concert at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Marcus Chen was the featured performer that night. He had played this exact same piece, Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. Heinrich remembered sitting in the audience that night, amazed by what he was hearing. Marcus had been young then, maybe 28 years old. He had worn an expensive black suit and his hair had been perfectly styled. He had looked like success. He had looked like someone who had the world at his feet. But even then, even at the height of his fame and success, Marcus had not played with this much depth. He had played beautifully, yes. He had played with incredible technical skill. But there had been something missing. Some quality that only comes from suffering. Some understanding that only comes from losing everything you thought mattered. Now Marcus had that understanding. The years of addiction, homelessness, and despair had not destroyed his gift. They had refined it. They had turned him into something more than just a talented musician. They had turned him into an artist who could touch people's souls. Heinrich looked around the room at the faces of his students. Victoria was still crying, though she seemed unaware of her tears. Ashley had put away her phone completely and was staring at Marcus with wonder. James was sitting on the edge of his seat, leaning forward like he was afraid he might miss a single note. All around the room, people were having profound experiences. Some were crying. Some were smiling. Some just sat in perfect stillness, letting the music wash over them like a warm wave. This was why Heinrich had devoted his life to music education. This was the power that music could have when it was done right. When it came from the heart instead of just the fingers. When it told truth instead of just showing off technique. Heinrich thought about all the lessons he had tried to teach his students over the years. He had tried to explain to them that music was more than just playing the right notes at the right time. He had tried to help them understand that real musicianship came from connecting with something deeper than just technique. But his words had never been enough. Most of his students came from wealthy families who saw music lessons as just another way to improve their children's college applications. They practiced because they had to, not because they loved it. They played correctly, but they did not play with passion. Marcus Chen was giving Heinrich's students a lesson that no teacher could provide. He was showing them what music could be when it came from the deepest parts of a human being, when it carried all of someone's joy and pain and hope and fear. Victoria Sterling, who had complained just an hour ago that music was boring, was discovering that music could be the most exciting thing in the world. Ashley, who had said music was old-fashioned, was learning that real music was timeless. James, who had wanted to quit violin, was remembering why his parents had wanted him to learn music in the first place. As Marcus continued to play, Heinrich noticed something else. The acoustics in the performance hall were perfect, designed to carry every sound to every seat in the room. But the music seemed to be traveling even further than that. Heinrich could see people standing in the hallway outside, listening intently. He could see faces pressed against the windows of practice rooms on the upper floors. Word was spreading throughout the entire academy. Phone calls were being made. Text messages were being sent. People were calling their friends and family members trying to describe what they were witnessing. But how do you describe something like this? How do you explain to someone who was not there what it felt like to hear Marcus Chen play piano? How do you put into words the way the music seemed to reach inside your chest and rearrange everything you thought you knew about beauty and truth? Heinrich realized that this moment would be talked about for years to come. Decades from now, people would still tell stories about the day a homeless man walked into the Millennium Music Academy and reminded everyone why music mattered. Some of the students in the audience had taken out their phones and were recording Marcus's performance. But Heinrich knew that no recording could capture what was really happening here. You had to be in the room. You had to feel the vibrations of the piano strings in your chest. You had to see the expression on Marcus's face. You had to experience the way the music changed the air itself. Heinrich thought about Marcus's journey, how far he had fallen from his days of fame and success, how much he had lost. His career, his marriage, his home, his health, his dignity, everything that most people thought made life worth living. But Marcus had not lost the one thing that really mattered. He had not lost his music. It had stayed with him through the darkest times of his life. It had been there when he slept in doorways and ate from garbage cans. It had been there when everyone else had given up on him, and now his music was saving him. Not just saving him, but transforming him back into the artist he had always been meant to be. Heinrich felt a deep sense of shame as he remembered his own attitudes toward homeless people. How many times had he walked past someone on the street without really seeing them? How many times had he assumed that people who had fallen on hard times had nothing to offer the world? Marcus Chen was proving that assumptions like that were not just wrong. They were dangerous. They prevented people from seeing the truth about each other. They prevented society from recognizing and nurturing the gifts that existed in unexpected places. The music began to build toward its climax. Heinrich could feel the tension in the room growing. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see where Marcus would take them next. Heinrich knew this piece well. He knew that the most difficult and beautiful parts were still to come. Parts that would require every ounce of skill and emotion that Marcus possessed. But Heinrich was not worried. He could see in Marcus's posture and in the confidence of his playing that he was ready, that he had been preparing for this moment his entire life, even when he did not know it. Marcus Chen was about to show everyone in that room what it really meant to be a musician, what it really meant to be an artist, what it really meant to be human. And Heinrich Sterling, one of the most respected music educators in the world, was about to learn lessons about music that he had never imagined possible. Marcus felt the music flowing through him like a river that had finally found its way to the ocean. His fingers moved across the keys without conscious thought. They knew where to go. They remembered every note, every phrase, every delicate touch that Chopin had written into this masterpiece over 100 years ago. But Marcus was not just playing Chopin's music. He was making it his own. He was putting his life into it. Every mistake he had made, every person he had hurt, every night he had spent cold and hungry on the streets, every morning he had woken up wishing he had not woken up at all of that pain was flowing into the music now. And somehow, magically, it was being transformed into something beautiful, something that could touch other people's hearts and help them understand that they were not alone in their suffering. The middle section of the ballade was the most difficult part. This was where many pianists failed, where the music demanded not just technical skill but complete emotional honesty. Marcus's left hand played a deep rolling bass line that sounded like ocean waves. His right hand danced above it, creating a melody that seemed to float in the air like a bird. Victoria Sterling had never heard music like this before. She had been taking piano lessons since she was 4 years old, but her teachers had always focused on playing the notes correctly. They had never taught her that music could feel like this, that it could reach inside your chest and squeeze your heart until you could barely breathe. Victoria thought about all the times she had complained about music lessons, all the times she had said music was boring and old-fashioned, all the times she had wished she could quit and focus on shopping and parties instead. Now she understood what she had been missing. Music was not about playing notes on a page. Music was about communicating things that could not be said with words. It was about connecting with other human beings in the deepest possible way. As Marcus played, Victoria began to understand something else. She began to understand how cruel she had been to him outside the academy. She had thrown coins at his feet and called him names. She had treated him like he was less than human, like he was nothing. But Marcus was not nothing. Marcus was someone who could create beauty that made people cry, someone who could take the worst experiences of his life and turn them into art that lifted other people's spirits, someone who understood things about music that Victoria was only beginning to discover. Victoria felt ashamed of herself, ashamed of her cruelty, ashamed of her ignorance, ashamed of the way she had been raised to think that money and privilege made her better than other people. Ashley was experiencing her own transformation as she listened to Marcus play. She had spent the last few years of her life focused on social media and getting attention online. She had thought that fame and followers were the most important things in the world. But listening to Marcus's music, Ashley realized how shallow her priorities had been. Here was a man who had real talent, real genius, and he was not playing for fame or money or attention. He was playing because he had to, because the music was part of who he was, because without music he would not be complete. Ashley thought about all the videos she had made for social media, silly dances and makeup tutorials and pranks. Things that entertained people for a few seconds and then were forgotten forever. She had never created anything that mattered. She had never made anything that could touch people's souls the way Marcus's music was touching hers. James was having similar thoughts about his own musical training. He had been playing violin for 10 years, but he had always seen it as a chore, something his parents forced him to do, something that kept him from the activities he really wanted to pursue. But listening to Marcus play, James began to understand what his parents had been trying to give him. They had been trying to give him access to this, to the incredible power of music to transform both the performer and the audience, to the ability to create beauty in a world that often seemed ugly and meaningless. James realized that he had wasted years of musical education because he had approached it with the wrong attitude. He had been focused on getting through his practice time as quickly as possible, rather than trying to understand what the music was really about. All around the performance hall, people were having profound realizations about music, about art, about life itself. Teachers who had been struggling to inspire their students were remembering why they had fallen in love with music in the first place. Students who had been going through the motions were discovering that music could be a source of deep meaning and joy. But the most profound transformation was happening to Marcus himself. As he played, he felt himself becoming whole again for the first time in years. The shame and self-hatred that had been eating away at him were melting away, replaced by something he had almost forgotten existed: self-respect. Marcus remembered who he used to be. Not the famous musician who had let success go to his head, not the addict who had destroyed his relationships and his career, but the young boy who had first fallen in love with music. The boy who had practiced for hours every day, not because he had to, but because he could not imagine doing anything else. That boy was still inside him. That boy had never really gone away. He had just been buried under years of pain and mistakes and self-destruction. But music had the power to dig him up. Music had the power to bring him back to life. As Marcus played the most beautiful and difficult passages of the ballade, he felt himself rising above all the terrible things that had happened to him. The hunger, the cold, the loneliness, the despair, all of it was still part of his story, but it was not the end of his story. Music was showing him that there could be a different ending, that redemption was possible, that a life could be rebuilt even after it had been completely destroyed. The piano sang under Marcus's hands. Each note was perfect, but more than that, each note was necessary. Each note was part of a larger story that could only be told through music. A story about falling down and getting back up, about losing everything and discovering what really mattered, about finding beauty in the darkest places. Heinrich Sterling stood at the back of the room, tears streaming down his face. In 30 years of teaching music, he had never seen anything like this. He had never seen music have such a powerful effect on so many people at once. Heinrich understood that he was witnessing something historic, something that would be remembered and talked about for generations, a moment when music revealed its true power to transform lives and change hearts. But more than that, Heinrich was witnessing the resurrection of one of the greatest musical talents of his generation. Marcus Chen was proving that genius could not be destroyed by circumstances. That true artistry came from the soul, not from success or recognition or wealth. As the music continued to build toward its climax, Heinrich knew that when this performance ended, everything would be different. For Marcus, for the students, for everyone who had been lucky enough to witness this miracle, music had the power to save lives, and Marcus Chen was living proof. The final notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 began to emerge from Marcus's fingers like prayers being answered. Each note was placed with the precision of a master craftsman, but also with the tenderness of someone saying goodbye to a dear friend. The music was reaching its conclusion, but everyone in the room wished it could continue forever. Marcus played the last soft chord and held it until the sound faded completely into silence. Then he lifted his hands from the keys and sat perfectly still. For a moment, the only sound in the performance hall was the quiet breathing of 200 people who had just witnessed something miraculous. The silence stretched on. No one wanted to be the first to break it. No one wanted to return to the ordinary world where homeless people were ignored and talent was measured by bank accounts and expensive clothes. Marcus slowly opened his eyes and looked out at the audience. He seemed surprised to see so many people. When he had started playing, there had only been Victoria and her friends. Now the room was packed with students, teachers, and staff members who had been drawn by the power of his music. For the first time in years, Marcus saw respect in people's eyes when they looked at him. Not pity, not disgust, not fear, but genuine respect and admiration. It was a feeling he had almost forgotten existed. Victoria Sterling sat in the front row, staring at Marcus with an expression of complete shock. Her world had been turned upside down in the space of one song. Everything she thought she knew about music, about talent, about the value of human beings, had been proven wrong. Victoria had always believed that she was special because her father was famous and her family was wealthy. She had believed that her expensive clothes and perfect appearance made her better than other people. She had believed that homeless people were lazy and worthless and deserving of scorn, but Marcus Chen had just shown her that none of those things mattered. Money could not buy the kind of talent he possessed. Fame could not create the depth of feeling he had put into his music. All of Victoria's advantages in life meant nothing compared to the gift Marcus had just shared with the world. Victoria felt her sense of superiority crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. For the first time in her privileged life, she understood what humility felt like. She understood that she had been living in a bubble of ignorance and arrogance. The coin she had thrown at Marcus's feet seemed to burn in her memory. How could she have been so cruel to someone who possessed such incredible talent? How could she have treated a true artist like garbage? Victoria began to cry again, but these were different tears than before. Before she had cried because the music was beautiful. Now she cried because she was ashamed of who she had been, ashamed of the way she had treated Marcus, ashamed of the values her parents had taught her. Ashley sat beside Victoria, experiencing her own moment of reckoning. She had spent years building an online following by creating shallow content designed to get attention. She had measured her worth by the number of likes and comments her posts received. But what did any of that matter compared to what Marcus had just accomplished? He had moved an entire room full of people to tears without caring about fame or recognition. He had created something beautiful not for applause or money, but because beauty was what his soul needed to express. Ashley realized that she had been wasting her life chasing meaningless validation from strangers online. She had been so focused on appearing successful and popular that she had never bothered to develop any real skills or talents. She had never created anything that would matter to anyone after the novelty wore off. James felt similar shame about his attitude toward music. His parents had spent thousands of dollars on violin lessons for him, and he had complained every step of the way. He had treated music like a burden instead of the gift it really was. Listening to Marcus play, James understood that his parents had been trying to give him access to something magical. They had been trying to help him develop the ability to create beauty and express emotions in a way that words could never accomplish. But James had rejected their gift. He had wasted years of opportunity because he was too immature to understand what was being offered to him. Now, seeing what real musicianship looked like, he felt like crying for all the time he had lost. All around the room, other students were having similar realizations. They were understanding that they had been given incredible opportunities that they had not appreciated. They were realizing that talent and hard work mattered more than money and connections. But the most profound transformation was happening to Heinrich Sterling. As the director of one of the world's most prestigious music academies, Heinrich had always prided himself on his ability to recognize and nurture talent. He had worked with some of the most gifted young musicians of his generation, but Heinrich realized now that he had failed in the most important way possible. He had created an environment where students like Victoria could develop such arrogance and cruelty. He had allowed his academy to become a place where privilege mattered more than passion, where appearance mattered more than ability. Heinrich thought about all the homeless people he had walked past on the streets of Chicago. People like Marcus who might have had incredible talents that the world would never discover, because they did not fit society's narrow definition of success. How many other Marcus Chens were out there, living on the streets, forgotten by a world that only valued wealth and status? How many gifts to humanity were being wasted because people were judged by their circumstances rather than their abilities? Heinrich felt ashamed of the values he had taught his daughter and his students. He had raised Victoria to believe that she was better than other people because of her family's money and connections. He had created a culture at his academy where students competed for status rather than striving for artistic excellence. Marcus Chen had just given Heinrich and his students a lesson in humility that none of them would ever forget. He had shown them what real talent looked like, what real artistry sounded like, what it meant to create something beautiful even when the world had given up on you. The silence in the performance hall continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Everyone was processing what they had just experienced. Everyone was trying to understand how one song could change so much about the way they saw the world. Finally, Heinrich Sterling began to walk toward the stage. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room as he approached Marcus, who was still sitting at the piano bench looking dazed and overwhelmed. When Heinrich reached the stage, he climbed the steps slowly. Marcus looked up at him with uncertainty. He did not know who this distinguished older man was or why he was approaching. Heinrich stopped in front of Marcus and looked into his eyes. Heinrich was crying openly now, not caring who saw his tears. "Marcus Chen," Heinrich said quietly, "I know who you are. I heard you play at Carnegie Hall 7 years ago. But you have never played like this before? You have never played with this much truth." Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. Someone had recognized him. Someone remembered who he used to be. After 2 years of being invisible, of being treated like nothing, someone saw him as the artist he had always been inside. Heinrich continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "I am Heinrich Sterling, the director of this academy, and I want to offer you something. Not charity, not pity, but opportunity. The opportunity to teach here, to share your gift with students who desperately need to learn what you just taught them." Victoria gasped when she heard her father's words. Her father, who had taught her to look down on people like Marcus, was offering him a job. Her father, who had always emphasized the importance of credentials and connections, was recognizing that Marcus's talent transcended all of those things. Marcus stared at Heinrich in disbelief. After years of rejection and humiliation, someone was offering him a chance to rebuild his life. Not just any someone, but the director of one of the world's most respected music academies. The room held its collective breath, waiting to see what Marcus would say, waiting to see if this story of redemption could really have a happy ending. And in that moment, everyone understood that they had witnessed something more than just a beautiful musical performance. They had witnessed the power of art to transform lives, to break down barriers, to remind people of what really mattered in life. Marcus Chen had shattered their pride with one melody. And in doing so, he had saved not just himself, but everyone who had been lucky enough to hear him play. Marcus looked up at Heinrich Sterling with tears streaming down his face. For 2 years he had believed that his life was over, that he would spend the rest of his days on the streets, forgotten by the world, forgotten by himself. But here was Heinrich Sterling, one of the most respected music educators in the world, offering him a chance to rebuild his life. I don't know what to say," Marcus whispered. His voice was hoarse from emotion. "I haven't taught anyone in years. I haven't even played piano regularly in months. I don't know if I remember how to be the person you're asking me to be." Heinrich smiled through his tears. "Marcus, you just reminded an entire room full of people why music matters. You just showed my students what real artistry looks like. You don't need to remember how to be that person. You already are that person. You never stopped being that person even when you thought you had lost everything. Marcus stood up slowly from the piano bench. His legs felt weak, but not from hunger this time. They felt weak from the overwhelming realization that his life was about to change completely. Victoria Sterling rose from her seat in the front row. She walked toward the stage with her head down, unable to look Marcus in the eyes. When she reached the bottom of the steps, she knelt down and began collecting the coins she had thrown at Marcus's feet earlier. Her hands shook as she picked up each coin. Each one represented a moment of cruelty that she now regretted with every fiber of her being. When she had collected them all, she walked up the steps to the stage. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I want to give these back to you. But not because you earned them by playing for us. I want to give them back because I need you to forgive me for throwing them at you in the first place." Victoria held out the coins with trembling hands. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. I treated you terribly because I thought my money and my family's name made me better than you. But you just showed me that talent and character are the only things that really matter. And you have both in ways that I can only dream of." Marcus looked at the coins in Victoria's hands. Then he looked into her eyes and saw genuine remorse there. He saw a young person who was learning one of life's most important lessons, that every human being deserves respect and dignity, regardless of their circumstances. "Keep the coins," Marcus said gently. "But use them to remember this moment. Remember that you never know who someone really is until you take the time to see them." "Really see them?" Victoria nodded, clutching the coins to her chest. "I will remember," she promised. "I will never forget what you taught me today." Ashley approached the stage next. She had been recording with her phone when Marcus first started playing, but she had put it away as soon as she realized how beautiful his music was. Now she held the phone out to Marcus. "I recorded the beginning of your performance," she said. "I was going to post it online to make fun of you, but I want you to have the recording instead. Maybe someone you love would want to hear how beautifully you played today." Marcus thought of his mother, who had died believing in him even when he had stopped believing in himself. He thought of Sarah, his ex-wife, who had loved him before the addiction destroyed their marriage. He wondered if someday he might be brave enough to reach out to her, to show her that he had found his way back to the person she had fallen in love with. "Thank you," Marcus said, accepting the phone. "That means more to me than you know." James was the last of the students to approach Marcus. He was carrying his violin case and his eyes were red from crying. "Mr. Chen," he said, "I've been playing violin for 10 years, but I've never understood music the way you do. Would you be willing to teach me? Not just how to play the notes correctly, but how to play with feeling, how to play with truth." Marcus smiled at the young man. "Music is not about the instrument you play," he said. "It's about what you have to say with that instrument. If you really want to learn, then yes, I would be honored to teach you." Heinrich Sterling had been watching these exchanges with growing amazement. His daughter, who had been spoiled and arrogant her entire life, was showing genuine humility for the first time. His students, who had always focused on technical perfection rather than emotional expression, were asking to learn about the deeper aspects of music. Marcus Chen had accomplished in one afternoon what Heinrich had been trying to achieve for years. He had shown these young people that music was about more than just playing notes correctly. He had shown them that music was about connecting with something deeper in themselves and in others. "Marcus," Heinrich said, "I meant what I said about teaching here. We have a faculty position opening next month. The pay is good and we can help you find an apartment. A real home. You could start your life over." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the generosity of the offer. After years of having nothing, the idea of having a steady job and a place to live seemed almost too good to be true. "But why?" Marcus asked. "Why would you take a chance on someone like me? Someone who lost everything? Someone who has been living on the streets?" Heinrich put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Because talent like yours is rare," he said. "Because the pain you've experienced has given your music a depth that can't be taught. Because my students need to learn from someone who understands that music comes from the soul, not from privilege or money." Heinrich paused, looking out at the room full of students and teachers who were still processing what they had witnessed. "And because," Heinrich continued, "you just reminded all of us why we fell in love with music in the first place. You reminded us that music has the power to heal, to transform, to connect us with the best parts of ourselves. That's a lesson worth more than any amount of money." Over the following weeks, the story of Marcus Chen's performance at the Millennium Music Academy spread far beyond the walls of the school. Students had recorded parts of his playing on their phones, and the videos went viral on social media. But these were not the cruel, mocking videos that Ashley had originally planned to create. These were recordings that showed the world what happened when true artistry met adversity and emerged victorious. News outlets picked up the story. "Homeless piano prodigy finds redemption through music," read one headline. "The power of music to transform lives," read another. Marcus found himself giving interviews to reporters who wanted to understand how someone could fall so far and then rise again. But Marcus was careful in these interviews. He did not want to become famous again in the way he had been before. He did not want the attention to go to his head. He had learned that fame without substance was meaningless. What mattered was the music itself and the connections it could create between people. Marcus moved into a small apartment near the academy. It was not fancy, but it had a piano. A real piano where he could practice and compose and remember who he really was. Every morning he woke up grateful for the second chance he had been given. As a teacher at the academy, Marcus was different from the other instructors. He did not focus primarily on technique, though he certainly taught his students to play correctly. Instead, he focused on helping them find their own voices through music. He taught them that every piece they played should tell a story, that every note should have meaning. Victoria Sterling became one of Marcus's most dedicated students. She threw herself into her music studies with a passion she had never shown before. She practiced for hours every day, not because she had to, but because she had finally understood what her father had been trying to give her all those years. Victoria also began volunteering at homeless shelters around Chicago. She wanted to make amends for the way she had treated Marcus and others like him. She wanted to use her privilege to help people who had not been as fortunate as she had been. Ashley changed her approach to social media completely. Instead of creating shallow content designed just to get attention, she began using her platform to highlight important social issues. She made videos about homelessness, about the importance of treating all people with dignity, about the power of music to change lives. James discovered that he actually loved playing violin when he approached it with the right attitude. Under Marcus's guidance, he learned to play with emotion and meaning rather than just technical precision. He began performing in nursing homes and hospitals, bringing music to people who needed hope and joy in their lives. Heinrich Sterling felt prouder of his academy than he ever had before. The story of Marcus Chen had attracted students from around the world who wanted to study in an environment where artistic integrity mattered more than social status. The academy's reputation grew, but for all the right reasons. A year after that life-changing afternoon, Marcus Chen stood on the stage of Carnegie Hall once again. But this time was different from his previous performances there. This time he was not performing alone. He was accompanied by a small group of his students from the Millennium Music Academy. Victoria Sterling played piano alongside her teacher, her fingers moving with newfound confidence and expression. James played violin with a passion that brought tears to the audience's eyes. Ashley, who had decided to learn cello, provided a rich, warm harmony to the ensemble. As they played together,